I would describe my artistry as multifaceted. I do quite a few different things behind the scenes in music. Particularly, I work as a music producer and an engineer. That's my day job. I work for Atlantic Records as their in-house, full-time audio engineer and producer. So that basically entails everything from recording bands as they come through the studio, doing drops for radio promotion, doing Spotify ads, custom Spotify ads and things like that. So that's a part of my artistry. It's something that I take very seriously. Then also I am a musician. I got my master's in music from NYU. So there's a performance element to the things that I do. As a producer, I make tracks. I also work with bands just as easily as I produce tracks. I can just as easily make actual recording sessions happen. So I would like to think that I'm pretty multifaceted, being a musician, being a performer, being a singer, being an engineer, being someone who uses the technology to tell stories as well. My influences are very vast. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, so obviously I have a huge soul music background. A lot of great record labels came out of Memphis, everything from Sun Studios to the Stax Studios to the High Record Studios that produced all of Al Green's music. I'm very big on the Stax sound, Otis Redding, Staple Singers, Isaac Hayes. Very big on, funny enough, being from Tennessee, bluegrass and country music. Rebel Records, I'm a big fan of Big Machine down there and some of the stuff that they're doing, so I'm really influenced by that. Just being black in America and young and coming up in the 90s, obviously hip-hop is an influence. I'm a big fan of guys like Kanye West. I love hip-hop production. It influences me a lot in terms of what I do as a producer. Big Kanye fan, big RZA fan, Rich Harrison fan, big Danger Mouse fan. You know, so in terms of soul music producers, I really look up to Jerry Wexler a lot. Rick Hall are two of my favorite producers. Tom Bell as well. And big fan Willie Mitchell. Big fan of him. Produced all of Al Green stuff. Once again, I'm a big, huge Al Green fan. So yeah, those are some of my influences, but they're very vast, and it doesn't just stop with producers and artists and music. I'm also a big fan of certain executives. Ahmet Ertegun, for example, the founder of Atlantic Records. Clive Davis, I'm a big fan of his, founder of Arista Records, and also did a whole lot at Columbia Records for a lot of years. So I always as well look at the executive story and try to think about, as a creative, how I can be an excellent creative as well as a great businesswoman as well. Gender Amplified is a movement that celebrates and supports women in music production. Gender Amplified started out in 2007 as a senior thesis project when I was graduating from Barnard College of Columbia University. I basically just wanted to find more women who were like me, who were using technology to tell stories, particularly music technology. Women who were making tracks and competing in beat battles and producing artists. I wanted to find those women. I had never known any. And for a long time, I felt like I was the only woman making tracks and aspiring to be the next producer, particularly in hip-hop. At that time, I was really focused on hip-hop. Since then, I've really branched out artistically, and so has Gender Amplified. We're really more inclusive of women in all types of genres and all different walks of life, not just specific to hip-hop. But at the time, I was really more focused on women in hip-hop production, and once I started asking those questions, where are these women? Are they like me? Are they regional? I started finding some really awesome women that I didn't know anything about, who were excellent producers and who I learned from, and who were very inspiring, and I wanted to tell their stories in some sort of interesting way, and I wanted to expose them to other people, larger audiences, women like me who were interested in being in the music business but didn't know how to get started in production. I wanted to create a network of women that would span regions and would span the continental U.S. So that's basically the birth of Gender Amplified. Over the years, it's become a much bigger thing. Now we have a website, genderamplified.com, that's vibrant and that has a really great blog where we profile women in music production who have done considerably well in their fields. We just try to highlight them and give them a little bit of shout out for the purpose of inspiring younger girls who might be interested in getting into the field. We had our first music festival last year at Barnard College. It went really well. We had 500 registrants online and about about 250 people who came out over the course of the day. And it was headlined by The Satisfaction, who are an incredible music production powerhouse, as well as a duo, a performance duo. Just think like Floetry that makes beats, you know. So they were great, and they came out. They supported, showed love. So that's pretty much what Gender Amplified is in a nutshell. There's so much more there, but you know, for the purposes of the video, I think that's like as succinct as I can be about it. In my house, I have a chalkboard that is a bit of a vision wall. When I come in, I write down goals on that chalkboard, and it's kind of a magic board in the sense that all the things I write down tend to come true. But it's not as much as the board is a magic board, as much as it's just a place where every day I walk past it. Every day I can see my goals, and it helps refocus me on reaching those goals, or it helps keep me focused on attaining those goals. So I personally believe that when we write things down that we want, or that we want to experience or have, we make those things real. We give them space. We provide space for those things in the physical world just by writing them down, and it creates a certain realness, a certain reality that helps those things manifest themselves. So in terms of my chalkboard, it's kind of a spiritual thing in a sense, and it's also a place where I can just organize my thoughts. In terms of what's on it currently, I have one thing up there right now, and it's the figure that I want to be making by the time I'm 30. And each year I get a little closer to that figure. And not that what I do is about making money, but I do recognize that if I want to live a life where I can make music exclusively, I have to be able to sustain myself to do so. And it would be wonderful to make this certain figure for the purposes of funding Gender Amplified, for the purposes of building a recording studio and doing some of the things that I want to do, and also to pay off some student loan debt. I got a lot of student loans from school because I invested in my dream. I wanted to be a music producer, and I invested in it. So it's all kind of, right now that's the only thing that's on my board. A lot goes into that figure. It's more than just the money, but that's the only thing up there right now. But I have my goals written in other places as well. I first became interested in producing in high school. I might have been 15 or 16 years old. My mother took me to a music shop, and in the shop there was a keyboard section, and I would tend to always gravitate toward the piano section of any music store, or keyboard section, because I was a player. And I came across a salesman who was demoing the most recent roll-in production keyboard. And in the time he sat with me to demo that keyboard, he recreated a whole song. He recreated a popular song on the radio that I knew and that I liked. And I saw him lay down the drums and lay down the keyboard parts and the horn sounds, all the samples that were in the song. He used the samples from the keyboard to reconstruct this song. And I was just immensely impressed by, number one, his fluency, okay, his ability to do that without any care. And number two, the complexity of the technology. I had no idea that you could make whole records right on a keyboard, and that you could essentially be a whole band in a box. And that was fascinating to me. And I knew at that time that this was something that I would revisit in my life. At the time, being so young and not having a job, I couldn't afford a keyboard like that. But once I got to college, I just began saving. I never really forgot about that experience. I began saving up money as I was working jobs and babysitting, meeting people who were doing production. I never really forgot about that experience, and I eventually bought a production keyboard when I was around 20 or so. And from there, I just began making tracks all the time, just all the time, working on my piano playing ability, my ability to mix records using a keyboard, eventually upgraded to using computer software. And it just kind of blossomed organically into this career goal, and ultimately a career purpose that's become a lot bigger than me, you know, hence Gender Amplified and a lot of the other things that I'm doing on the side of working as a producer. But that was the original seed that was planted that day in that music store, and it just kind of blossomed from there. I think it's immensely important. I would argue that it's important for anybody who wants to be a music producer or a music writer, a songwriter, to study every day what they want to do. I can only talk from my own personal experiences and the benefits that I've seen in terms of growth in my own career. You know, I make it a daily practice to make tracks, a daily practice to engineer, a daily practice to study what's on the radio. But more so than study what's on the radio, study what makes me feel something. Sometimes music that makes me feel is not necessarily popular. And that could just have to do with politics, not necessarily the quality of the production itself, you know. So I study music that makes me feel some sort of way. And I try to figure out what is it about that music that inspires me, or that makes me want to dance, or that makes me smile, or that makes me cry. I always study those things. And sometimes the answers to why does it sound so good, the answers are really simple. Sometimes they're nuanced. Sometimes they're very complicated. But that's what daily practice helps you discern. It helps me discern every day that I'm working on stuff. So it's immensely important to study your craft daily, to make it a daily practice. It's really important as you're aspiring to be in the music business in some form or capacity to identify your resources for job placement. You know, so the question is, how do you get a job in the music business as a music producer, as an engineer? There are a million ways to answer that. I can only speak to what I've done and what I've noticed has worked for me. I spend a lot of time on message boards. Audiojob.com is an excellent resource. Even some of your more commercial job databases like Monster Jobs, Career Builder. Sometimes it can be tedious, mediabistro.com. Sometimes it can be tedious to keep track of all of those postings. But my current job at Atlantic Records, I found on audiojobs.com. Okay? And being aggressive about applying for those jobs and then finding a way to get an interview, to get FaceTime with somebody at an organization that you're interested in working for. It's really important to know, you know, if you're interested in working at Atlantic Records, who's the CEO? Who's the head of H&R? Sometimes this information is just on LinkedIn. Now you have to, I think, be aggressive and use the resources that are immediately in front of you. Also, something I found works for me a lot is telling people, talking to folks and telling them I'm looking for this job or that job. Just being very open about it. Another thing is always keeping a resume ready to go. You know, always keeping a resume ready to go. And when you're not in the job that you want yet, to work that job like you are. And I'll give you an example. What I do professionally for Atlantic Records now, I was doing for years out of my house. So just because you don't have the job yet doesn't mean that you don't have to act like you have the jobs. Producing artists, you know, I had a day job working in education for a while. And I would work that day job and come home and produce records out of my house for artists into the wee hours of the morning and get up and go to my education job the next day. Well, that's a form of resume building. That's also a form of relationship building that is just 100% necessary, you know. So, and now that I'm in the position doing the work that I've always wanted to do, I'm not a novice. I know exactly what to do and exactly how to come in and be aggressive because I've done it on a guerrilla budget for so many years. And I've done it on broken equipment for so many years. And when you get great equipment and a real budget to do the work that you've been doing on a fraction of that, it just kind of, you're already ready to go, and the people that you're working for are pleased that you already know the ropes. You can reach me online very easily through my website, eboniesmith.com. That's EBONIESMITH.com. Whatever messages you send through that, I always get them and I'll respond to them. So feel free.